Welcome to the MADLOVE Your Life Show. I'm Mary Dee, the Joy Catalyst, here to be your host and transformation guide. Mad Love is about the mad, making a difference, and love is what we serve up to live a delicious life. My intention is to help you spark new ideas, break limiting beliefs, and align with your deepest dreams and desires. Get ready for laughter, inspiration, and finding your inner roar in every show. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to be here today, launching the first season of the MADLOVE Your Life Show on Bold Brave TV. And if you didn't know, MAD stands for Make a Difference. I wish for more of that love in the world that makes a difference. And if you do too, then you are in the right place. And this season, I have a lot of fun in store for you, along with insights and guidance and content that will really fill your cup. I also have topics and questions that can inspire you, challenge you, and most of all, I hope, will ignite a little fire of confidence inside of you so that you'll be moved to try something new, to do something different, and expand your experience of life so that you can really feel like you are living your best life. And speaking of living our best life, this week is my birthday. And on Friday, which is March 1st, I am going to be celebrating 47 years of being on this earth in my current form. Or as I like to say it to my friends, being 29 again. For the kickoff show, I thought I would share with you the top 5 things that I have learned that have made my life better. And if you knew me, you would know that I've lived a big life, and it's because I chose to take a lot of risks. I've chose to go on a lot of adventures, and I always keep an open mind. But more importantly, I keep an open heart. And as I share my 5, I would love to know if you have ever thought about your own top 5. Do you know what the lessons are in your life that have made you better or stronger or more resilient? Maybe a little wiser and a little more happy? Uh, I really had to think through this list, and I want to dive in with you because I think these are juicy. And I think that if you'll also spend some time percolating on each of these topics, that you are also going to really find the lessons and find those things that make life really delicious. So here we go. Number 1, every time that I have a judgment, I know that I can shift the energy around that thing that is activating me by treating it with compassion instead. Because when we get into a cycle of judgment, we replay over and over again the story that we have around that judgment. So, for example, I used to have a partner who was highly critical. He was body image critical. And we would be sitting at a red light, and someone would walk across the crosswalk, and that person might be overweight. And he would immediately get disgusted, and he would go, "Oh, that person, they're so fat." And I always found that to be such a fascinating judgment and such a quick one. And I also know where it came from. It came from being rooted in a childhood that was steeped in how you look on the outside. And so he was carrying that with him, and it was really his own judgment, even on himself. And when you think about what goes through your mind to create a judgment about a total stranger, then you can really sink in and say it's that moment we create separation between us and someone else. And in this moment, what's really beautiful is we can switch what's happening in that story to something else, and we can switch it with compassion. So think of compassion as a light switch. So we go from judgment to compassion, and that compassion allows us to look deeper, and it allows us to relate to someone more personally and more on that human side of things, where we can say, I don't know why that person is overweight. It really shouldn't matter. It really should not matter. And what if they have an illness and they have to take a medication and that medication makes them bloated? Do you suddenly switch your story from they're eating chips all day and sitting on the couch to, oh, like they have real stuff going on in their life? So just think about that a little bit and also recognize where are those judgments for you, whether they're about other people or whether they're about yourself. A few years ago, I was in a deep healing session and I was recognizing all of the judgmental thoughts that I was having about myself. And so many of us have this where our biggest judgments are actually about ourselves. I was judging myself about my body. I was judging myself about my past. I was judging myself about things I couldn't change because they were all in the past. And in that moment, I learned to meet myself with a lot of compassion. And the compassion said, hey, this body has brought you a long way. This body, although battered with scars, has brought you through breast cancer, and you're healthy and you're whole now. This body has hugged people that you love. It has hiked beautiful mountains and it's carried you through this life. And again, think about the judgments that you have, whether they are about you or other people, and notice what might shift if you instead meet those judgments with compassion. This is an act of presence and of consciousness. And I want to encourage you to take that with you today. And I want you to notice how you can feel in your body when you shift from judgment into compassion. And there's an exercise you can do, which is write out all of the judgments that you have, whether they're about yourself or about others. And I encourage you to brain dump all of that stuff out, because those brain dumps just allow you to take all the little floaties that are in your brain and in your heart and throw them on a piece of paper and really see them and go, oh, here are all the things, right? And as you look at those judgments that you have, and some of them might be old, some of them may be very old. My guess is that some of you are really carrying some stuff that's happened way in the past. And you have your version of the story. And you've played it over and over again for yourself so many times that you've made yourself right. You're very righteous in this story. And I'm not invalidating you, because that feeling is true for you. That experience is true for you. And I want to invite you to surrender to letting go of the pain that you may be carrying with that scenario, and think about a different lens. And that lens might be one of compassion. And if you did, how would that change you? And I'm going to give you a very personal example from my own life. When I was very young, I wasn't even 5 yet, my parents got in a huge fist fight. It was their first and only fist fight that I ever experienced. And in that, a divorce ensued. So things were brewing, things got physical, and then things got really strategic really fast. And as that happened, my mom over time told me this story, and the story went like this. The story said, we got divorced and we had a college account for you. And your dad went to the bank and he took all of that money out. And now who knows where that money is for college. Now, at the same time, my mom also told me a story about how she went to the bank and she found whatever joint accounts they had and worked with the banker in order to remove as much money as possible. And I don't know how at the time as a child I put all of this together, but I did. And what I realized is she, probably not meaning to, but this is all happening on a very survival subconscious level, was creating a story where she could basically say, hey, your dad is stealing from you. right? And so as a child, it would be easy to have that thought go in my head of, oh, things went awry and my dad is stealing from me. But when I look at it really objectively and I look at it with a lot of compassion, I say, these are two adults having a very charged experience, and both of them are grabbing whatever cash they can because they know that their life is no longer going to be together. It's no longer a we, it's going to be a separated me. And in that moment, I can have a lot of compassion for both of them going to take out whatever money they can find from the bank because they need to live and survive and don't want the other person to somehow have the upper hand. And in that compassion lens, I can see how perhaps there might have been a time where I could have carried a story that, oh, my dad stole from me. That was my college account. But I don't believe that my dad pulled up to the bank and was like, how can I steal from a kid today? And that's where compassion can really adjust the story for you, and it can really change things for you. And it can be really freeing in a lot of ways. The second thing that I will share with you about the lessons I've learned is that beauty is subjective. It's so subjective. I grew up in around LA, and with that, a lot of media and marketing on what beautiful is. And for a while, I let someone else define that for me. And in doing that, I never felt at home in my own skin. And as time went on, I became more body positive and I switched into gratitude for my body. And I started dating and was realizing, wow, like I'm really desirable, like more desirable than I thought in the perception of what was happening to me. And it really gave me confidence and it helped me shift how I was feeling about myself. And as life rolls on, I ended up dating a man that I was very in love with. And it was really funny to me because in the early days of dating, he explained to me that he really actually loved a little extra weight on a woman. He liked to be able to feel like a little fat behind her arms, and he loved the curves. And I thought, oh, well, sign me up because that's me. I've got a little bit of curves, and I've got a little extra around my waist. And it was maybe the third or fourth time after we had been physically intimate together, and I laughed because I hadn't seen him in a couple of weeks, and he was observing, and he goes, "Oh, you've I can tell you've lost a little weight." And I was like, "Oh." But he almost said it with slight disappointment, and it was such a mind-blowing experience to have this voice of recognition that said, you're not actually being criticized because there's extra weight. You're almost being criticized because you've lost weight. And that was a magical moment for me. And in that, as I continued to date and as time has gone on, I really have a chuckle with myself now because I realized that although I had my own story and my own weight hangups in my mind, and I see how far I've come, y'all. I remember the time where it's like pull the covers up and have lots of really great robes so that you're always keeping myself covered. And then I also remember being so free and then being someone who's really comfortable walking around naked, now in these days. And it just makes me laugh because it's such a shift and it was so freeing. So what is going on in your mind? What is going on in your head around your own judgments on your body, on the way you look, on your skin, on your hair, lack of hair, all the things that you can sink into and you can go, maybe there's a shift in my perception of beauty. Maybe I've been defining beauty in a completely wrong way for myself. And I want to encourage you to find a way to redefine what beauty means to you and what it means to be beautiful. third thing that I've learned is that the ego is not always our friend. The ego causes more rifts than it causes peace. And we can see this in history by looking at how when one person doesn't forgive, they can create a internal righteousness of I'm right, they're wrong, and I'm going to stand by that. I'm going to die by that sword. There is also the pain of separation. You can see that oftentimes in families. You can see it in history. When someone creates separation, then especially through the ego, this is where people fall. This is where people can be viewed as objects instead of humans. And you see this in history with the different wars. You see it in politics. You definitely saw it over the pandemic. You see it with how people, with race, religion, so many things, so many things. And so oftentimes there is some ego happening in there, and the ego can be so strong. When I was married previously, I was married for a very long time. And when we were uncoupling, for the most part, a lot of it was done in a very as peaceful a way as it could have been done at the time, in trying to meet it in my aligned self with compassion, knowing that I've loved this person for a very, very long time, and now we were complete on our relationship. So as we are getting complete on our relationship, and I never want to refer to it as a failed marriage, because I think so oftentimes all of us out here who have danced the dance of relationships, whether that's marriage or a long-term relationship, you can sit with it and go, oh, I have this failed marriage. And it can bring up lots of emotions around it being failed. And part of my reframe for myself was, let me not treat this as a failure, but let me treat it as a beautiful lesson, and let me treat it as a time span where I shared my life with someone, but that has come to completion. And that really takes the weight off of it needing to be labeled as successful or unsuccessful. And in this, as we are uncoupling, one of the things that ended up coming up, and it came up right at the end, of course, was the furniture. Y'all, I don't know why. Suddenly it meant so much to either of us to keep the bed or the couch. Maybe it was just not wanting to bear the financial burden or hassle of having to buy those things again. But in hindsight, and as you look at it, it's like, in 5 years, am I going to care about the bed or the couch? Probably not. I'm probably not even going to have the same bed or couch in the next 5 years. But what's more important? In that moment, the ego was like, oh, it's keeping the couch or the bed because there's maybe a one-upness to it. Maybe it's I got this and you didn't. And we were both actually having contention over a couch and a bed. And this went on for a couple days. And again, after sitting with it, I went, oh my gosh, what is happening right now? And I said, it's the ego. It's the ego wanting one more thing. And then I remembered my value around this relationship. And I said, I care more about maintaining peace, knowing that breaking up is already a hard thing. So how do we keep the most peace and compassion intact with this person that I have loved for a very long time and who has loved me? We haven't been perfect. We can't seem to make adjustments that are needed to keep us on the track of staying together. But as we come to completion, what do we want to do? How do we want to treat this? And a big piece of that was, let's maintain peace. And how we maintain peace is I said, you know what? I'm easily going to let go of this couch and I'm easily going to let go of this bed. I'm going to release them with love. And gratitude says, thank you, bed and couch, for the time that you spent here with us as a family. And how fun for me that I get to remake my space again. I get to recreate what this looks like. I get to go pick out a new couch. I get to be in a new bed. I get to be in the energy of a new bed, untouched. My bed, my space. And that's what I did. And to take it a step further, I actually spent the time to write my ex husband a thank you note. And in the note, I didn't say things like, I wish you had blah, blah, or I wish we had done more blah, blah. I didn't do any of those things. I only focused on creating gratitude. And the gratitude piece is what's so important here, because the gratitude is the attitude that made all of the difference, because it created this openness that and this vulnerability that said, thank you for the life that we had together. Thank you for never being someone I had to peel up off of the couch. Thank you for being someone who always got stuff done. Thank you for supporting me when I did go through breast cancer. He was so supportive in those months. Thank you for taking care of our dogs. Thank you for all these things. And I was just so grateful, because it wasn't all bad. Oftentimes in breakups, we tell ourselves these stories about everything was so terrible, but it's not true. If things were terrible the entire time, we wouldn't have been there. We would have never been there in the first place. Something had to be good at some point, or at least had to be perceived as good at some point. And as this is happening, I'm freeing myself as I write the letter, right? Because it's feeling so good to actually remind myself of all the goodness that was done between us and that happened between us and all the things that we shared. So that letter, in that letter, I also expressed to him and said, if you need to be angry with me in order to make it easier to heal, I get it. And that's not my desire for how we move forward together in our relationship. But if that's what it needs to be, then I'm surrendering to that as well. But my hope and my desire is, and then I wrote to him and said, these are the things that I would love for our relationship to look like in the future. Even though we're not going to be a couple anymore, I would still love for us to be friends. I would love for us to still share the dogs. I would still love for us to be able to have some holidays together, because we're in a community of people that we love. I don't want our friends to have to think that they have to choose one or the other. Like, can we allow water to go under that bridge? Can we let some bygones be bygones? And can we start on a new slate, viewing our relationship in a different way? And I sent him that note as he drove away, not knowing what his reaction or response was going to be, and also not being attached to what it needed to be. So, with that, this is where the biggest piece of that lesson paid off for me. My ex was from Hawaii, and he had all this really nice koa wood furniture. And if you know anything about koa wood, it's indigenous to Hawaii. There's only so many of those trees, and so there's only so much koa wood in the world. And if you go into a shop that sells koa wood anything, it's pretty pricey. It's a very beautiful, beautiful wood. I still have some frames and things here at the house that are gorgeous, and I've come to really love this wood finish over time. He really loved his koa wood furniture. He had lots of it. It was all beautiful. It was all expensive. And I used to tease him when we were married. And I'd say, if you ever make me mad enough, I might have to throw that koa wood furniture in the front yard and just set it on fire, which is terrible, y'all. It's terrible. I would never actually do it. But those were my, petty, petty threats. So, of course, he's a month later is going to my parents' house, where we've got some leftover koa wood in the garage that he needs to clear out. And I'm not there for the experience. And I just assume he's going to go in, clear it all out, and be done with it. And I hadn't really heard back from him after sending the letter. We'd exchanged a couple texts, but nothing too deep. And what was funny to me is my sister calls me. She says, "Hey, I want you to know that he's left you something here in the garage." And he said, "Let Mary know it's a gift. It's my gift to her." And she said, "I want to show it to you." So she takes the camera over and she shows me. And it was literally my favorite piece of all the pieces of koa wood, which was this beautiful, like 6 foot tall mirror. And it's outlined in koa wood, and it sits on the floor. You know, it's one of those that sit on the floor, and it swivels, and it's a full body mirror. And I just laughed because I was like, oh, that he could depart with one of his favorite pieces of furniture, because he really loved, y'all, when I say he loved that furniture, he really, really loved that furniture. That he could depart with a piece and give me a piece that he knew that I liked so much. That meant a lot. And that was the passive way of him giving me that head nod of like, okay, let's be friends. Had he taken the ego response, he could have just taken it all up, walked away angry, and said, done with this. And I understand that in relationships, sometimes things don't go well, and that things can feel hurtful and things can feel painful. And there's a lot of wrongs that tend to happen, especially at the end. We start counting those wrongs, and it can seem like that's a heavy list because we've forgotten all the rights, and we've forgotten all the good memories, and we've forgotten that maybe this person helped us make beautiful humans that we love so much, you know, that they contributed to making your beautiful babies. And I think that when we can go back and really see it for what it is, we can find those beautiful moments and those moments of tenderness and connection and vulnerability. And both people do have to be willing to meet each other there. Sometimes it just depends on who's going to be the person to make the move. And sometimes you might have to be that person. Sometimes you might have to be the person that makes that move. You may have to be the person that makes that move multiple times or over and over again until you feel like you get it right and until they can soften. Sometimes there needs to be an apology. And sometimes that apology might look like, I am sorry. Just in general, I'm sorry that this hasn't worked out. And it's my desire that we could move forward in a more positive way for our own peace of mind, for our kids, for our life, for just being better humans. So that one was a big lesson, and it was one that I believe has paid me in dividends. I am still friends with my ex-partner, and we have been able to do uh, things like holidays and seeing the dogs and all that together, and that's been good. It's been good. Okay, number 4. This one has also carried me so far. It's carried me so far, and it's that it's okay to change your beliefs. Growing up, I had a lot of religion, a lot of religion. We were Baptist. I want to say that I had my grandma was maybe like Methodist at some point. And then I've got a dad, my original birth father. He was pretty kind of anti-God. And then, you know, you sprinkle in friends that are Catholic and friends that are Mormon, and I've got all kinds of religion growing up. And then I went to a very, very strict church once upon a time. And that was such an amazing time to lean into the lessons of life. The things that I heard that were said and the rules that came up from all of these things shaped my ideas. And what I realized is so many of them shaped my ideas about God and who God is, or at least who God is according to someone else's definition. If any of you are previous listeners of my podcast, I have a podcast from last year. It's called The Mary Dee Show. And in that podcast, I interview a gentleman named Paul Sakalski. Paul is amazing because he talks about an experience where he goes to India and they say, "Tell me about the God you believe in." And then tell him, I'm botching this story. So if you want the full immersiveness of it, please go back and listen to the show. It's a really good episode. But he goes and they say, and then once you write your definition of God, and then what you've been told or what you know to this point, and then write, if the gloves are off, who do you want God to be? And he said that shifted everything for him. And I had a very interesting similar experience because at one point in my life, I sat down and I realized I have all of these people and books and stories telling me a version of God. And it's like kind of like it would almost be, I can liken it to someone trying to tell me about my own mom, right? Someone trying to tell me about my mom, but I have my own experience with my mom. And so, although someone might have a different experience with her, I can look at that and go, okay, well, that's their experience of her, but my experience of her is XYZ. And that was the same thing when it came to God. And I realized, oh, how about that? What if, I take away all the noise that exists out in the world and I simply sit with, what has my own experience with God been? And what would I like it to be? And what happens if the box that I've been presented with God in, what happens if I take the box away? And now God doesn't live in a box anymore, but God is expansive and huge and the universe, and that many things can be true. What if not just one thing is true? What if many things are true? What if instead of there was a garden and there was Adam and Eve, that it was, well, there was a garden, there was Adam and Eve, and there were 100 other couples, or there were, and couples meant men and women in any version of how they want to love each other. There's so many ways we can go with this. Anyway, what I'm expressing to you is the moment I was able to take God out of a box, I realized that my life stopped feeling so rigid around rules and around things that feel so counterintuitive or feel so not myself. One of those is around sex. Sex is a big one. I feel like that one is the one of the big cusps, and we can see this just in recent events around abortion and not being able to do it in certain states, and just the rules that are sort of coming up and rearing their ugly heads again. And what's interesting is I don't want to make anyone wrong in what they believe, but this is why it's such a hard issue, because everyone has their belief and that's what they're fighting for. And I definitely believe it's good to have your beliefs and to stand up for what you believe. Also, can we treat those beliefs with some compassion? Can we also, for a moment, take ourselves out of why we're so staunchly in a belief and stop ourselves and say, what if I chose to think about this differently? How is the other person seeing this? There's a metaphor. I don't know if it's a metaphor, but it's a story about a person who is looking at the ground, and from where I'm standing on the ground, they see a 6. And they're looking at the ground and they see the 6. They know it's a 6. This is a 6. And then from where you're sitting on the other side, you come up to me and you stand in front of me and you see on the ground a 9, and you see me standing in front of it. And I say, hey, do you see the 6? But as you're looking at it, you're like, no, there's not a 6. That's a 9. And from my side, I'm like, no, it's a 6. But from where you are, you're like, no, it's a 9. So it's one of those situations where it's actually both. So have some compassion, sit with that, and think about, where can we challenge where we believe certain things are absolutes? And where can we go to the mountain, sit alone with God, and crush away all the noise, just flutter it away, clean it out, and really hear what God has for us. Really listen to our spirit and really get centered to that. And if you're someone who's like, Mary, I'm on that edge of like, I don't know if I believe in God, or perhaps maybe you're angry with God. So much to unpack there. This is an opportunity, if you're angry with God, to go have your own conversation with God and figure out where that anger comes from. And is it because someone has designed God for you, or they've told you who God is? Or can you go on your own experience, or ask to create an experience? And maybe that experience is you simply saying, God, I don't know if you're real or not. Will you, if you are, will you show me? Will you give me a sign? Will you create movement in my spirit in some way that says that you're real? And sit with allowing whatever's going to show up for you show up. That's my little challenge for you on that one. So many of my ideas around God, like I said, just really taking God out of the box has been so freeing. And on number 5, it somewhat goes along with that for my top 5. This is the 5th one, which is, no one cares more about my opinions than me. And because of that, I can choose to stay in suffering, or I can choose to release suffering. And when I say that, what I mean is, I look at the world and I see that there's the suffering that we seemingly don't have any control over. And you've heard me reference it a couple times in the show today. But one of those things is, hey, I had breast cancer. I was faced with, what is this diagnosis? Am I going to live? Am I going to die? What's going to go on? And that's a suffering, right? That I can't control. I can't control that it happened to me. And then there's the suffering I can control, which is, I don't know how many days I have left. And so let me make the most of what I do have. And that's choosing not to relive suffering every day when it's in my power to not sit with the suffering. Because too many of us are sitting with suffering that's unnecessary. For the person who goes to the gym every single day and doesn't ever give their muscles a rest, and their muscles are tearing at them, and now they've got injuries, that's a chosen suffering. And it's deeper than that, because there's something driving the behavior that says, I'm going to exhaust myself with whatever outcome I believe is so necessary for me to have. And this is where I say we can choose. We can choose to suffer, and we can also choose to not suffer in so many more cases than the ones where I say, yes, suffering certainly happens in the world, and some of it we don't have much control over, but we do have control over how we respond to it, and we have control over much of the suffering that does go on right here between our ears and between our head. So I'm curious for those of you out there who may have met yourself in some of these ways, and what ways do you suffer? What ways can you calculate in your mind that you entertain suffering, that you allow it to be part of your life? I'll give you a couple more examples. So, how often do you have someone ask you for something and you want to say no, but for whatever reason, for wanting to be liked, for fear of not being liked, for just having some feeling in your body, that state that makes you just blurt out yes, even when your whole body is saying, just say no. That's a form of suffering. And it's the opportunity to stop your suffering at any time. And that's why I started number 5 with no one cares about my opinion more than me. So, what's your opinion? The moment that you stop having the opinion of, if I say no, they're not going to like me anymore, then maybe you try saying, okay, and so what? Then you give yourself an opportunity to actually say no. And when you say no, then you end up not betraying yourself. You end your own suffering, and you don't do that thing that you keep saying yes to, even though you want to say no. And I know that one might hit hard, because so many of us, from childhood, from again stemming from that place of wanting to be liked, I don't believe that anyone shows up in the world and they want to be hated. I think that there are people who choose to take certain stances because they know that that's what gets attention, right? So by being the contrarian, that can certainly be a marketing tactic. I also think that when you look at movie stars, this is a great example. I don't remember the name of the movie star, but he was the kid that played like the really like evil prince in Game of Thrones. And if you remember, I mean, he made it through a lot of episodes and a lot of seasons, and nobody liked him because he just played such a cruel character. And he was saying how, like, in his real life, because that's what people would see on the TV, people would just kind of personify him in that way. And so he's always seen as the bad guy, even in casting rooms and things like that, always to be cast as the bad guy. And I would say that, from a Hollywood perspective, if you want to always be able to land the part of the villain, then that can be a good thing. But from where you sit as a person trying to connect with others and to have a human experience and to have relationships, that can be a little rough if people are already coming into it with that view and that lens. So sometimes it pays to be the bad guy. Most of the time it doesn't. All right. Well, with that, I do want to spend some time being able to take questions, and I want to encourage you all to send those in. You'll see a number on the screen. You can also email it in. And if you've got any questions, we're happy to take those live. Each week, I do want to make time for those. So as we progress through the weeks here, I want to invite you to bring your questions and your concerns. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to know, what ways are you going to make some shifts for yourself? Has anything hit for you today? Has anything felt like there's movement in your soul around making a shift or treating a judgment with a compassion? And can you find ways to do that as you move forward? All right, so I'm going to give you guys a quick summation here of my top, and we'll go back to the beginning here, which is anytime that you have a judgment, you can shift its energy by treating it with compassion. And there's so much healing in it. So I really want to encourage you that if you don't do anything else this week, try that one, because it's a really, really, really good one. The second one is that beauty is subjective. I encourage you to create your own definition on what's beautiful. Create your own definition around what's success. Those are really good ones to go back and revisit and see how you might have had some old ways of thinking or conditioning. And it's up to you at any point to go in and change the definition. You get to be your own Webster's dictionary in this life, and you can change that definition anytime you want. It's completely in your right to. The third one is that ego is not always our friend. And how can we put connection above ego and really just check ourselves? That thing that you're so staunch on, is it going to really matter 5 years from now? Is it going to matter 5 minutes from now? We're often so quick to clutch things close to our heart that aren't that significant. And it comes from just that place of needing to be right. It can come from a place of maybe not having your needs met when at an earlier time. And it's being able to just sit with that a little bit and recognize it and not allow it to create the ripple that you don't want in your current relationship or your current situation. Number 4, it's okay to change your beliefs. That's another book definition space that you get to own and shift. And with that, one thing I will mention also is it's okay to change your mind. So whether it's shifting your beliefs or changing your mind, people will say to me, oh, well, sometimes I find that out of integrity. If I told someone I'd watch their dog, but now I've decided like I should have never said yes, and it's just going to be too much on me. It's okay. It's okay. Where what would be out of integrity is for you not to tell that person that you're not going to watch their dog, and then you just don't show up. What would be in integrity is to be able to say, hey, friend, I know I told you I'd watch your dog. Something's come up for me. And I realized in the moment I should have said no and I didn't. I want to apologize to you for that, but I'm not going to be able to watch your dog. And that's it. That's all. There doesn't need to be more. There doesn't need to be a big to-do. That's how you stay in integrity with your word and with yourself and not betraying yourself. And then, of course, number 5, which is no one cares more about my opinions than me. And that's going to be true for most of us. And so much of our opinions and our stories that we create, we have the ability to be masterful with them. We have the ability to make shifts and changes. We have the ability to not suffer any more than we humanly have to. And with those 5, I hope that you find beautiful lessons for yourself. And again, would love to hear from you. There are so many great ways to connect with me and to connect with my content. You can go over to Facebook. You can go over to Instagram. You can go over to LinkedIn. If you just type in at the Mary Dee, that's MARYDEE. You'll be able to pull up any of my profiles on any of those given platforms. You can also go to the Mary Dee Show on YouTube. You can also head over to the website. It's www.marydee.com. That's MARYDEE.com. And there'll be ways for you to subscribe. I do a quarterly newsletter. We always have content going on the social channels. I love to interact with you. I love to hear your feedback. Shoot me an email, drop into my DMs. I want to know what you've learned. I want to know what feels good. I want to know what value you've gotten. I also want to know what other like questions are brewing in your mind. What other musings do you have? And most of all, what are you letting go of? Right? This is as I walk into year 48, it's so fascinating to me because I'm like, wow, I can't believe I've been on the planet this long. And I sit with so much of it and remember like what a beautiful life it's been and continues to be. And so much of that is by creating choices that feel good, creating choices that I do have some control over. And when I think about, I love to ask people when it's their birthday, I always say, what are you letting go of? And then what are you calling in? So I've thought a little bit about this and I've decided that I am letting go of control because I really don't have a lot of control. I believe we think we do, but we don't. I can be driving down the road doing everything right in a vehicle. I could be going the right speed limit. I could be wearing my seatbelt. I could be in a super giant, I don't know, Suburban with fantastic airbags and perfect tires. But you know what? If another vehicle or a meteor flies out of the sky and nails me, I'm done. It didn't matter that I did everything right or perfectly. So I'm letting go of any of that like perfectionism or control because sometimes I'll see a little bit of it show up for myself and I have to just remind myself, no, let's not entertain that. It's okay if things are imperfect. It's okay to keep going when things may feel a little out of control. It's also my choice to decide on whether my attitude is going to be one of apprehension or one of excitement and exuberance. So I'm choosing excitement and exuberance, and I hope you will too. I do hope you will join me next week. My special guest is Amin Sheiko. He is a Forbes 30 under 30 entrepreneur who is shaking up the educational tech world, and he's giving back in a really big way. We're going to talk about his organization. We're going to talk about where he's been through, what he's been through in life, and we will have some beautiful nuggets for you. And for those of you that have children, for those of you who are entrepreneurs, you are really going to love what he's about. He's just really making waves in education tech, and it's going to be helpful for you as you've got kids that are going through school and learning, maybe young adults also going through that process, and then also encouragement for young entrepreneurs to see just what he's gone through and the leg up that he's gotten in life. Also, remember, you can always catch Mad Love Your Life live here every Wednesday at 4 Eastern on Bold Brave TV. You can also head over to marydee.com to grab those links to my YouTube channel where we post an extended version of the show every Friday so that you can get even more great content. I will go and post an extended version of the show, which is going to be 3 more things that I've learned in my 47 years as this birthday special. So hopefully you guys can catch that, enjoy it, and hear the extended musings. I was going to do 47 things that I've learned, but I realized there's just not enough time for that. All right, I do see a question that came through on social. Hold on. Let's take a question before we fully wrap here. I think we have time. All right, the question is from Sarah. Hi, Sarah. And Sarah asks, How do you treat someone with compassion when they've done you so dirty? Sarah, I feel you. I feel you, and I know that's deep. So here's the thing with forgiveness. Here's the thing with how we move on, how we move forward. There are going to be people and times and situations that don't feel good to move forward with. And so I would never encourage you to force your way through something that doesn't feel good. Or if someone's been, abusive, those can be really, really tough to recover from in terms of having any kind of relationship with a person. Oftentimes we're leaving because it just doesn't feel good. So that's the first thing. So just know it doesn't mean it has to be peace, love, and joy with every single person. Sometimes it's being able to acknowledge there weren't always terrible things. However, there's an infraction here that in this current space and time, you cannot or aren't prepared to release or forgive in this moment. Or maybe you're prepared to forgive it, but it tells you who they are and they're not someone that you want in your life. And that's okay too. I've definitely had those situations where I have someone who I think is a great person, who I think we're close, creates an infraction. And then I go, oh, okay, I see who you are. And my experience of you is that you're not someone that has the integrity level of the close friendships that I want to have in my life. And with that, I'm going to choose to not be your friend. So that happens too. And that's okay. Where I believe we as a society can do better is in situations where we are uncoupling, where we are divorcing, where those things are happening. Because in those particular situations, it allows us to, again, recognize that, that person that you picked, they couldn't have been that bad because would you really pick them? Like there had to be something good about them at some point. And then at some point there was a shift. Or maybe you were bamboozled from the beginning. It's having some wisdom and discretion and discernment around figuring out what that is. Also, moving forward, what does this mean if you have children in a relationship? I have watched a couple of my friends that have broken up co-parent actually really, really well. And it's because instead of putting themselves at the center of the relationship, they put their children at the center of the relationship. And by putting the children there, they're always coming together to say, how can we co-parent this successfully as we can, knowing that kids are going to go through hormones and their own things growing up, as we all did. But as parents, how do we come together and how do we manage the things that we don't agree on? Do we bring in a coach? Do we bring in counseling? Do we bring in a close friend that can mediate for us? Do we come up with a process where it's like, okay, I don't get to maybe my version doesn't win this time, but yours, that means I get the next say, So maybe it's, you don't like their friend Johnny. And so, but mom likes Johnny, dad doesn't like Johnny. There's got to be some compromise. Maybe it's okay. If dad doesn't like Johnny, well, then Johnny can still come over, but it has to be supervised and he's got to be able to spend time with dad and your kid so that dad gets an opportunity to learn more about Johnny and maybe adjust how he feels. There can be lots of things in that. So with that, I think that is literally the last question that we have time for today. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you so much. And I'm looking forward to future episodes. Don't forget, we'll be here again next week and every week for the next 52 weeks on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock Eastern. Thanks and have a great day. Oh, and before I go, until next time, let me speak a blessing on you. May abundance always walk beside you. May joy always go before you, and may love always guide you on your path. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. We air live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Bold Brave TV. We hope to see you back next week. For more ways to connect with my guests, content, programs, and retreats, just head over to www.marydee.com and subscribe. That's MARYDEE.com.